Hello and welcome to Why Design. I'm your host Chris White, and in this podcast series we explore the career journeys of design and engineering leaders from the world of physical product development. And in today's bonus episode, we're trying something a little bit different. This is a live recording from a workshop I delivered to final year design and engineering students at Loughborough University. The session is all about how to stand out in a crowded graduate job market, covering everything from CVs and portfolios to interviews, LinkedIn and proactive job hunting. Tried to pack it full of practical advice and real employer insights. And whilst it was originally aimed at soon-to-be graduates, the advice applies no matter what stage you're at in your career. If you prefer, you can watch the session with slides included. The full video is now available on YouTube. And if you'd like to hear more bonus content like this in the future, just drop me a message on LinkedIn or send an email to chris@teamkodu.com. As always, this episode is proudly powered by Kodu, your go-to recruitment partner for physical product development. Let's get into it. Thank you for joining me, and it's wonderful to see you all. And congratulations, coming out here today, putting yourself out there, you're demonstrating the exact skills and attributes that employers are looking for. By simply turning up, you're showing that you're being proactive, that you've got curiosity. What on earth is this guy going to talk about? And you want to solve problems. So my name's Chris. I run a business called Kodu, and I'm also the host of the Why Design podcast. Over the last 12 years or so, I've worked with some fantastic brands and design consultancies in the physical product design and engineering space, helping them to grow their design and development teams. And on the Why Design podcast, I interview founders and design and engineering leaders about their career journeys, where they started, where they've been, their ups and downs, their lessons learned along the way, and what they're most excited about. We're also building out the Why Design community, which is on WhatsApp. We're running online huddles. We've got workshops and meetups. And I'll share a link later so you can get involved in that. But on to why I'm here. So, quick show of hands. How many of you have already applied to at least one job? Okay, that's most of you. And how many of you have heard back from any of your applications? Okay, about half the room. So, let's be honest, job hunting can seem overwhelming. Most students, in fact, most kind of people, whatever career level they are, they just don't know where to start when it comes to job searching. And employers on the other side, they're often buried in countless applications. They all look and sound the same. The good news is there's a lot you can do to cut through the noise. And we're going to cover some of that today. So throughout the session, if you have any questions, head over to menti.com or scan that QR code. Code there is that. I've not used this before, so it might go horribly wrong, but if you scan that, you can put your questions in as they come through. We'll go through them at the end. But, we're not a massive group here, so if you have questions as we go along, this is an interactive session. It's not a lecture. Just put your hand up or shout out, and I'll try my best to answer as we go along. Okay, so why is it so hard to land that first role? It's not just hard for you, it's hard for employers too. Most of the time it's not a question of your talent, it's a question of clarity. And how can you communicate, or how well can you communicate what you think? How proactive are you in shaping your story? That's what gets you noticed. These next slides will outline some of the challenges that you and employers are facing, and we'll dive into some of them later on in the slides. Firstly, most of you are going to struggle to stand out. It's a crowded market. I put an advert out, I worked at a graduate role a few years ago, that got over 700 applications. That's a lot to get through. And if your CV looks and feels the same as most other CVs, and your portfolio looks and feels the same, then it's going to be very difficult to stand out. And employers, as I said, they've got a lot of a lot of bandwidth. Well, they like a bandwidth. They've got a lot of volume to get through. So what can you do? Make sure you tailor your CV. The amount of information that's out there today to customise your cover letter. There's AI that you can do research to make your cover letter stand out. Include why you're applying and what excites you about the company or sector. And a bit of a flash from the past really here, sending the post. How easy it is to apply online today. Click that orange apply now button. How often do you get something in the post that's worth reading? So send your portfolio off. It's super effective. And when building your portfolio, what do you tend to leave out? Do you leave out sketches? Do you leave out the mistakes? The rationale? I think quite often we focus on perfection. We want to show off that shiny render. But it's a bit of a trap, Employers want us to see how you work. They're not really interested in the projects themselves or kind of how shiny the render is. They want to know how you think. They want to see the messy stuff. So show your process, not just the outcomes. Include the iterations, the failings, the learnings. And as Nick Chubb said, and I'll be splattering kind of quotes from the podcast throughout this. Nick's the design director over at IDC down in Slough. Show us the messy stuff. The ideas that didn't work. Show us how curious you are. Experience. It's patch 22, especially if you're kind of in your second year and you've not yet got your had an internship, or if you bypassed the internship altogether, You need experience to land a job, but you need a job to get experience. So I'm hoping that those of you in your final year have taken the opportunity to get an internship because it's so valuable. However, if you haven't, or if you're struggling, create your own. Reach out to small companies, reach out to consultancies, offer to do a brief, or just take up your own brief. You don't have to just do the projects that are mandated to you. Go beyond, take on freelancer gigs from Fiverr or Upwork. There's plenty of people I know that started off just doing those odd jobs, those kind of things just to get by, and before you know it, you're building up a portfolio of work and problems that you've solved. And it gives hiring managers something real to assess, no matter how small it is. Once you've cut through the noise, what next? You've got to go to the interview. So for all that kind of that time and energy spent kind of applying for roles and not hearing back, and you finally hear back and you get the interview, and it all falls down because you're not prepared. So it's so important to follow through. And employers, when you turn up and you're not prepared and you haven't practiced interviews, the interviews feel shallow and generic. And the employers have to interview a lot of people, have to screen a lot of CVs and portfolios. So it's soul destroying when someone that performs so well on the first stage in terms of their CV, and then it's all a bit flat because it's shallow. So make sure that you do your research. Make sure that you practice your storytelling. Be prepared to talk through your projects, what worked, what didn't, what lessons you learned, and learn the STAR technique. It's been around for a long time. It's very straightforward. Situation, task, action, and results. We'll go into STAR technique a little bit later. I've got a download as well, which you can get access to later, which breaks down the STAR technique, gives you some example questions as well to prepare for. But essentially, the STAR technique helps you with those questions that you can't prepare for, the competency-based questions. So tell me about a time when. Give me an example of a problem that you've solved, or give me an example when a project failed. Those kind of things that put you on the spot. But with the STAR technique, it gives you breathing and thinking space. So you talk about the situation that you were in, the tasks that were involved, the actions that you took, and the results that you gained. And it's when you do it like that, it sounds kind of robotic, but trust me, when you practice it, it's super effective. Going back to the search, quite often the only source of the jobs that we've got visibility to are through the job boards. It's quite a narrow search, but the reality is that most jobs are never actually advertised. Something like 10 to 15% of all vacancies make it onto job boards. So if you're just relying on job boards for your search, you're missing out on the vast majority of opportunities. Yeah. For employers, again, it's all about that volume. It's way too easy to click apply now, so they're swamped. And trust me, if you reach out to someone that is about to hire or might be hiring next year, or they're hiring, but you reach out to them directly, you're going to jump the queue. You're going to kind of cut through all that noise really quickly. I mentioned earlier, I had a graduate role that received over 700 applications a few years ago. How many people do you think called me up about that job? And one person called me. Out of 700, one person had the motivation to pick up the phone. And who do you think got the interview? Yeah. Okay, so go beyond the job boards. Research the companies that you really want to work for. LinkedIn's got over 1 billion users. A bit of a spoiler for one of my slides later, but there's never been a better time to get data and research. Search for people that are doing the same job that you want to do. Search for industrial designers, search for product designers, mechanical engineers, whatever your field is that you're looking for. Search it, you'll find companies that employ that level of talent and then work your way up. Reach out to the people who work there. Use your network. You connect it. I'm assuming most of you have got a LinkedIn profile. You most have got some kind of social media. There's people you're connected to that, if you ask them, they will help you. Attend networking events and cut through the noise with posts, letters. Send your portfolio in the post, or if they're local employers, go and knock on the door. You will be seen. You've got voice notes, videos. The amount of options you have are endless, really. You've just got to choose to be proactive and do it. But be wary of AI. AI is a great tool. I use it daily in my business. But when I receive a CV or a cover letter or an email that's been written with AI, it sticks out like a sore thumb. No one's that excited about the unique opportunities. There's cliches and tropes that AI love to use if you don't use it properly. So just be wary of kind of over-personalising in that respect. And the final point, this comes up a lot on the podcast. In terms of expectations, you work so hard when you're at university. You've got to this point, you're ready for the world of work. So you want that first job to be your dream job. But the reality is, very few people get their dream job for job number one. But that job number one and job number 2, 3, 4, however many times, it's the things you learn, and it's often the dull or the less glamorous. So it's more about what you can learn rather than what name's above the door. So embrace those kind of messy, dull, boring jobs and take out what's in it. I speak to people who are now kind of at director level within big multinational corporations. People who have worked all over the world that started off doing bitty freelance work because they couldn't get their first full-time gig. People who worked kind of pulling tractors apart. It's all valuable experience if you let it be. Embrace what you can learn. So, but focus on the long play. What can you get out of those short-term opportunities? Because you've got a long career ahead of you. But whatever you do, make sure you do your research on the role in the company. Be honest about the kind of work that you're looking for and willing to do. And again, don't rule out the boring jobs, because I guarantee there'll be a lot more interesting if you let them. So let's talk about CVs. So you've got 7 seconds on average. That's what industry tells me. That's roughly what I give, in terms of if I've got 100 CVs to look through, I'm skimming through kind of some of the headlines there. So You've got to make an impact straight away. You guys are all starting off, not really any need to go past a single page, but, if you've had some really useful experience, talk about it. Don't worry about going on to a second page, but make sure that in 7 seconds, whoever's looking at your CV can make a judgment call. Is it worth reading more, or are they going in the reject part? Okay? So, as a basic, you need to say who you are, where you are, what you do, how you do it, and why. You need to get that across fast. You want to keep it clear, clean, concise, use white space, avoid the grey wall. The amount of CVs I've received over the years that have got size 6 fonts and 0 border because they've been told you've got to keep your CV to 1 page. So it's like, yes, but I'm going to put a dissertation onto 1 page. It's like, I ain't reading that, You've got, and I don't think I'm alone there. Most hiring managers internally and internal recruiters, they might be fielding 400 or 500 applications per role, and they might have 30 roles on their desk. So make it easier for them, In terms of the layout, we're going to get kind of tactical here, really. Make sure your contact details are. It sounds basic, but if I've got to go and hunt for an email address or a phone number, if it's squirreled away on the bottom, or if it's not even there at all, the amount of CVs I've seen recently don't have a phone number. So you desperately want this role, but I can't get hold of you. I've got to wait for you to respond. Just make the recruiter's life easier. Put your qualifications top and centre, and include a short bio. Again, make it short and snappy. Get creative with the text, the bold, the italics, whatever, to pull the eye and tell a story on your CV. But your career history, if you've had projects, you've had jobs, include your project work and talk about the problems you solved. But please put it in reverse chronological order. Companies want to know where you are now or what you've done most recently. They don't want to be hunting down the CV to try and find that. Confuses the heck out of them. Talk about your key skills, your software, education. Talk about your hobbies and interests. Can't stress enough how important personality is on this. If you resonate with one thing with an employer, if you've got one thing in common, that could be the difference between you getting the phone call and someone else not. Okay. As Tim McLean on the podcast said, if it doesn't stand out, it won't get read. So, the basics, spell check it. Again, as much as we're looking to stand out and to cut through the noise, we also don't want to stand out for the wrong reasons. We don't want to annoy the reason. We don't want to kind of give them reasons to ask questions or, that they can't answer. We want to get through that. So make sure you spell check. If you're using a tool that doesn't have a spell checker in it, get someone to proofread it. Run it through ChatGPT and get it to spell check it. Just don't send it out with red squiggly lines and spelling mistakes on there. Make sure you've got plenty of white space on there. Again, make it easy to read. It shouldn't feel like a chore. Use colour and images. Again, we don't just want a black and white CV. We want kind of tasteful colour. You're all design students, so I'm not going to try and preach you on design here, but the header space at the top of your CV where your name is, that's a great bit of real estate for a hero shot. You might not get the opportunity to put your portfolio on every single application, but you can certainly save your CV as a PDF, and you've got some real estate there for that. And again, save as PDF. That's a universal standard that your document will look the same on whatever platform the person's reading on. Okay, so it doesn't matter what fonts they've got installed on their computer or not, it's going to come out how you want it to. So PDF is the gold standard there. Now, some tips from my side. Okay, so it's not all about applying for jobs and being read, it's about being found. In the UK, there are something like 30,000 recruitment businesses live. But not many of them are specialising in design, but the same rules apply. Recruiters, they prefer to go out and find candidates, because, again, for graduate roles, we're talking hundreds of applications. So if I can go and find someone, if someone can give me a call, it's basically getting to the result quicker. So make sure that when you're putting your CV together, you're considering kind of what recruiters might be looking for. So think about things like industry standard job titles. If you've had a year in industry and your job title was mechanical engineer grade 2, with some kind of internal jargon, it's probably not what the rest of the industry is calling you. So add some variation in there. When you're talking about the work you did, the problems you solved, there's another opportunity to get keywords in there. For instance, I quite often search for people that have got plastic injection molding experience. So I'm searching for plastic injection molding or plastic. If that's not on your CV, you might not appear on my results. Things like SolidWorks and CAD, we can't search for logos, or at least I'm not aware that we can. So whilst a logo would look really great on your CV, and if you did placement year at Samsung, having the Samsung logo instead of the Samsung text looks great, but again, it's not searchable. So if I'm looking for someone with SolidWorks and all there is the little SolidWorks logo, your CV might not appear in those search results. You might not get the call for that perfect job. Okay. And a little test for you, again, if you're using a more creative tool like Adobe Illustrator or something like that to put your CV together, that's fine. But when you flatten it as a PDF, just try and get the cursor tool, see if you can actually highlight some text, and that will tell you whether or not that document will be searchable by online platforms, by recruiters. Because if it's just a flat image, again, it's not going to turn up on any results. If we've got any questions before I move on, I feel like I have kind of just given you a load of basics there, but go ahead.
About skills on especially the technical skills on
yes.
the CV and the software you can use, how will you present that? When you say logos are unsearchable, sometimes people will include an icon of the
yes.
software they can use. Is that not going to come up?
It won't come up. So my advice for that would be, if you say, for instance, you've got the SolidWorks logo, write SolidWorks underneath it. Mm-hmm. Again, assume that the people reviewing your CVs don't know what the SolidWorks logo is, because they're not. Most recruiters, internal and agency, aren't design experts. I'm not a design expert. I've just been recruiting designers and engineers for 12 years, so I recognise some of the logos. So it's okay for me, but the internal recruits at VAX, for instance, or at Joseph, they might not know what the latest logo looks like, so you might get overlooked, even if you're applying. So yeah, spell it out for them, make their lives easier.
Follow-up question.
Go for it, yeah.
We had a debate about sometimes students tend to assess how well they can use a skill, and we tend to say don't do this.
Yeah.
Just kind of list the skills that you can use. Don't kind of try to assess if you're good or bad.
Yeah.
Would you agree with this?
Absolutely. So this is going back a few years now, but I ran a session with a load of hiring managers on a Zoom call during lockdown, and we were talking, because I ran a similar course to this on online at the time, and that was a big kind of. It's not off-putting, but if you've got two CVs next to each other, and one saying I'm a 3.5 star on Creo, or let's be realistic. If you're just entering the world of work, you're not an expert in anything. You've done a lot of learning here, but the learning really starts when you enter industry. Okay, so just be cautious about labeling yourself an expert, because you will always find that someone disagrees. And the worst thing is, you come across well, you won't, because you won't hear back from them, but let's imagine the recruiting manager, the internal recruiter, whoever's reviewing CVs that day has had a bad day, and that just happens to annoy them so much that you could be perfect for the role, but you're going in the bin. At the end of the day, that's the reality of it. Now, there are AI sorting tools coming out, and a lot of big companies are using those, so that may kind of take some of that kind of human emotion out of the day or whatever, but I think it still stands that the keywords and logos are going to be much easier to assess whether you're a fit on paper to those AI-sifted jobs as opposed to logos.
Is it relevant to add our education and what we've got? I guess university, then people for what
in terms of GCSEs and A-levels?— Yeah. It's a, you're at the stage where there's not a lot of kind of body of evidence for what you can do or what you've done, unless you're a mature student, where you've got a career and come into it. But there are some companies that I've worked with over the years that, if you don't have the right A levels, you're not even getting an interview. Even if you're 20 years into industry, consultancies in Cambridge I've worked with where they've rejected PhD kind of graduates with 20 years experience that got a PhD in mechatronics, a degree in mechanical engineering, but because they did the HND route and then topped up to a degree and didn't do A levels in maths and physics, they're not even going to interview them, which is bonkers, but it happens. And those are the ones I know about. So put your A levels on there, or whatever route you took, and talk about the lessons learned, because whilst your degree is, to that point is the pinnacle, there's still a lot of merit in your journey to get there. Yeah.
Photos of self on CVs?
I'd say no. I think you're all good-looking people here. You can have the most photogenic photo, but you're still leaving yourself open to conscious and unconscious bias. Your hair could be the wrong colour, your beard or tattoos or whatever, it might just not fit with what that person perceives good looks like. So I would always suggest, rather than having a photo of yourself, have an image of something you've designed. That's a better use of that kind of real estate on your CV. There's people I've interviewed for the podcast that when they do their first stage, they insist on doing a phone call rather than a video call because they don't want to see the person. They don't want to let bias in. There's a lot of companies now will filter out names on applications, because it's been proven, if you have a foreign sounding name, you're less likely to get an interview. As much as that is, there's conscious and unconscious bias happening all the time. So, it's a personal choice, but I would recommend against it.
Can I ask about LinkedIn? Sometimes you have a link to your LinkedIn account on the CV. Of course, you can click on it and can see someone there.
Yes.
So would you recommend having that LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn, absolutely. I mean, reality is, people are going to click on your LinkedIn, so be conscious about what you're posting on social media. If you don't think prospective employers are checking your social media, I hate to break it to you, but they are. So contrary to what I've just said, you do need a photo on LinkedIn, because it's worse to have just a grey kind of shape of a person rather than an actual person.
Putting like personal projects?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about the problems you've solved and how you solved them and the outcome. It doesn't matter if it was a success or failure, it's evidence of the way that you work. And at this stage in your careers, it doesn't matter how successful your projects have been, it's how you approach them, how you take feedback, how you bounce back, how you learn, because employers are looking to invest in you. And from my own experience, I'd much rather take someone on that's completely green, but has got the right attitude, that is curious, and is super coachable, that takes feedback well. And that's the feedback I get from industry kind of pretty much every day. So, show whatever you can that's, demonstrates problem solving. Okay, should we move on? Cool. What do hiring managers really want? I've been in a privileged position. I've been running the podcast now for just over a year. I've been interviewing people as part of my profession for coming up to 12 years. But one thing that comes through, kind of no matter who I'm speaking to, it's, they just want to see curiosity. They want to see that you take feedback well. They want you to show me how you think. And that comes through, the conversation. So, again, whether it's on your CV, whether it's on your portfolio, whether it's on the LinkedIn posts, whether it's on your LinkedIn profile, whether it's on the conversations you have, talk about the problems that you solve, how you solve them, ask questions, demonstrate curiosity, and take that feedback well. Before we jump back in, I'd like to take a moment to tell you about something we're building alongside this podcast, the Why Design community. We're bringing together people across the hardware and physical product development space, designers, engineers, founders, and leaders creating a space to connect, share ideas, and tackle the real challenges shaping our industry. We've been running online huddles to explore key topics, collaborating on projects, organising both in-person and virtual events, and even setting up pre-networking groups to help people meet ahead of major industry events. And if you want to be part of it, we've set up a WhatsApp group where the conversation keeps flowing between episodes and events. You can find all the details at teamkodu.com/events, or just drop me a note on LinkedIn and I'll happily add you in. I'll also make sure the links are included in the show notes. But that's all from me now. Let's get back to the conversation. Okay. In terms of job searching, let's kind of dive into some tactics. So, not every job is on LinkedIn. Not every job is on a job board, as I said earlier. Something like only 10 to 15% of jobs are ever advertised. Some of the best roles come through conversations, referrals, speculative approaches, So get used to asking, who do I know? And who can I speak to? There's a bunch of job boards I've put on there, which good sources, put your CV on there, go and apply for the jobs, but don't forget to Google it. I know it always sounds really flippant when I say that out loud, but Google is actually one of the best sources for jobs. If you're for job listings, because it collates all of the jobs all over the internet. It kind of sends its little spiders into the company career pages, and it collates them all there. And what you also get, as you can see on there, the blue bubbles along the bottom there. That's an advert that was on yesterday for Joseph. What Google for Jobs does, you search for industrial designer in London, it will show you all the industrial design jobs in and around London, but it will also show you this particular role, what others like it, where else is that job advertised. So there could be niche job boards on there that you're not familiar with, that you could go and look for other jobs, or you could upload your CV, so more recruiters have access to it, more hiring managers can see it. On the job boards on the back end, I've subscribed to a bunch of them, Total Jobs, for instance, and Indeed. If you upload your CV to that platform and it triggers a search that I've got saved, standard one would be design engineer and plastic, I'm getting an email with your CV straight away as soon as you click upload. I'm not unique in that. I said there's 30,000 recruitment businesses or so in the UK, and hundreds of thousands of recruiters who are all setting up these searches. So the more job boards you have a CV loaded onto, the more opportunity you are going to be seen. Okay. There is a downside to that. You will get calls, and you've got to keep track of where your CV is, because once you get the job, you probably want to kind of disable it because it can get a bit tiresome. I'm happy to say that as a recruiter, not all of us are the same. We are motivated to speak to people. Google's especially good for that. So in terms of outside of the job boards, word of mouth is by far the most common way, to find work or to recruit. So lean into your network. Who can vouch for you? Who that you have in your social group is in employment now? Who can they recommend you to? Where are they working? If you've got a LinkedIn account, who are you connected to that's in employment that could help you out? Follow up again. If you don't feel like you're annoying people by following up on applications, trust me, I get a lot of phone calls, not so many from job seekers, but I can't answer the phone all the time. I miss 2 or 3 calls whilst we've been talking, So I don't mind if someone calls me 2 or 3 times, in a week or in a day, if they're keen to get feedback on a particular role or kind of process that they're in. You're doing me a favour by being persistent. It shows me that you care, that you really give a stuff about kind of the role or the opportunity. Most people, let alone graduates, as I said earlier, don't follow up, they don't reach out. So that's a really quick win for you to stand out. Okay. Right, LinkedIn. Put your hands up if you've got a LinkedIn account. Every one of you. Okay, cool. Keep it up if you've got more than 100 connections. Yeah, 200, 500, 1,000. Who's going to win? Okay, 1,000. How many have you got? 1,000-ish, yeah. That's really good. You know, even if you've got 100, that's 100 people that you can reach out to, that you'll have some kind of contact details, whether it be email address, phone number, whether it be, you know, just being able to send a DM. If you're connected with someone, you can message them, you know. There's so much power in the network. Now, LinkedIn has got over 1 billion users. That's a lot of accounts, and it's getting, you know, it's growing every year. But most people are ignoring their network. In fact, most people don't post on that. They don't go on there. They just have an account. It's dormant. You know, and I don't know if you've heard of Alex Hormozi, but he bangs on about how your network is your net worth. You know, he makes millions and millions of dollars every year just from his network on LinkedIn and posting. You know, now I'm not here to try and convince you all to become social media influencers or post routinely on LinkedIn. What I'm trying to do is give you a bit of an insight into the opportunity within LinkedIn. Now, I post most days on LinkedIn, so people in my network, they see my face, they see my orange, you know, I've got an orange band around my face, they recognise me, I get recognised at networking events, you know, people trust me because they feel like they know me because I talk about problems that the industry and designers are facing. But posting just once a week straight away puts you in the top 1% of LinkedIn users. And if you've got 100, 200, 1,000 followers or connections, you know, they're going to start seeing you more frequently because most of their people in their network aren't posting. So they're going to see your content, whether it was a week ago, a fortnight ago, it's going to pop up in their feed. And not only that, but the people that they're connected to, or the people that you're not connected to but are a second degree, will start seeing your stuff because their connections are liking or commenting or sharing your stuff if it's of interest. So it's a great way to get visibility. You know, but more importantly, it's a great way to, you know, lean into that network. You know. So, but before we kind of go out starting posting, you know, you've probably got questions about what I can post and all that kind of stuff. I can answer those, but before we start attracting people to look at our profile, we need to make sure that it's set up right. You know, we need to make sure it's worth landing on. You know, if it looks dull or empty, if people just won't engage. You know, so in terms of some tips, and I'll show you some examples of these guys. Use a friendly headshot. Don't use passport photos or mug shots or kind of staring off into the distance or anything. You need to look approachable. Make your headline clear. I'll show you some examples of that. Put in looking for opportunities or graduate design engineer. Doesn't really tell a story about kind of who you are and what you can offer. But graduate design engineer passionate about sustainable hardware tells a slightly different story. Okay? And I'm sure you guys are no stranger to this in terms of noise around kind of job titles, product designer, is it digital, is it physical? You know, industrial design, what does it really mean? You know, we're not designing machines most of the time. But, so, make it obvious what you do to that person that just happens across your profile. That headline as well, by the way, follows you everywhere. So if you're commenting, it appears under your name as well. So you've got an opportunity to broadcast who you are and what problems you solve to anyone that happens to be in that kind of comment train as well. Fill in your experience. You know, basically treat your LinkedIn profile like a CV. Put your projects on there. You've got loads of options. They're adding new stuff all the time. You can put featured kind of sections. You can have a link to your portfolio. You can really kind of add a ton of content. And again, in terms of from the recruiter side of things, we have safe searches when someone updates their profile and it's got the right keywords or in the right industry or what, you know, I'm getting alerted through LinkedIn Recruiter. You know, I'm not alone in that respect. LinkedIn makes a fortune out of my peers in the industry. You know, so use it to your advantage. So you've got several things where your eye goes straight away. I mean, this guy's got a friendly face, got a product that he's designed, you know, so straight away you can tell, and his headline as well, physical product design engineer. There's no escaping what this guy does. He's also filled out the about section. Yeah, actually, Alex is a really nice guy. He's been out of work for quite a few weeks now, but he posts every week about his journey, and he's getting more and more traction. And it's quite an interesting one to follow. He's been picking up freelance work along the way, you know, and whilst it's been painful for him because he's trying to find that perfect job, along the way he's meeting new contacts, and then he tells me that he's having a lot of fun, you know, but essentially journaling his job search. But you know, he's not got a lot on there, but you can see here, you know, in terms of his posts there, and he's like celebrating stuff, and you can see people are liking, they're engaging. 68 people have liked this post. You know, 68 people there that you could potentially reach out to and say, hey, thanks for liking my post. I'm glad it resonated with you. How's things? You don't know, that simple kind of copy and paste message that you could put out 68 times. If one of those comes back to you and says, actually, I've really enjoyed your content. I was thinking about reaching out to you because I've got a project. You don't know, do you?
What do you think about the open to work banner? There was a bit of a debate about that.
Use it sparingly. I think when you start looking for work, absolutely, you get a lot of visibility. So use it. But if you've got it on for 3 or 4 months, you know, people keep seeing you on there, like with the open to work, and you know, it's more then about the questions that aren't answered about why. So that's a difficult one because it is super useful. But I think, like Alex is doing here, there are better ways to get positive attention. He doesn't, but he has had it, and it has had plenty of calls. But you know, he's decided to go all in on this journey. I met him at a Design Truth event a few weeks ago, or probably a few months ago now. But, and he was excited to kind of catch me up on kind of his LinkedIn journey because he'd been following what I've been doing. He's sort of basically just borrowed your playbook, Chris, and applied it to my job search. And whilst he's still yet to find the perfect job, he's having a lot of fun on the way. He's meeting some interesting people. He's been doing some freelance stuff. So it's, you know, it's all valuable storytelling that he can take into the perfect job interview. You know, that's what it's about. If we look at this guy, Sam Jones, I mean, he's got a great freelance company name, Jam Scones, bit of spoonerism there. So he's not afraid to have a bit of fun with what he's doing. You know, straight away, you've got a product that he's worked on. It's nice, approachable, kind of happy face there. Independent industrial designer and engineer, helping early stage startups rapidly build market-ready products. So he's telling you what he does and who he does it for, the problems that he's solving. And he's a freelancer, you know. In his about section, I help startups and early stage companies turn ideas into market-ready physical products efficiently and strategically. That's quite a powerful first line. If you click see more, you know, it's telling you who he is and what he is. It's not war and peace. It's quite effective. And then again, he's using the featured section. So any post that you have, you can tick the star box, put it as a featured section. It's quite active on LinkedIn as well. You know, so another good one. And then in terms of a more experienced person to follow, I interviewed this guy start of the year, I think it was, Benkley Pattenon. Runs his own design agency called Inon. A bit more experience, but in terms of someone to follow, in terms of, you know, from a social media, LinkedIn content creation, and just general personality, his mantra is he just decided about 2 years ago he just wanted his audience to know who he was, and his strategy is he just basically journals his life, the projects that he's working on, the networking events he goes to. He's generally one of the nicest guys in design as well. He's talking about his travels, the work he's doing in Thailand. He's putting videos of kind of springs being manufactured. You know, he's not got an agenda. He's not trying to sell. He's just kind of basically telling people who he is. So when you have that first interaction, the ice is already broken. You know, and that's what LinkedIn enables you to do, is to get people to feel like they know you and trust you. You know, before you even speak. I'll put those links on it. They're good Ben's, especially in terms of just his content, are good to follow. Right, so that's all well and good having a nice profile. It's all, and having a, posting every now and again. In terms of what to post, don't overthink it. Talk about the projects that you're doing. Again, just journal it. Talk about problems you're solving. It doesn't have to be war and peace. Put photos on there. Photos are super engaging. Little videos. If you've just kind of got a prototype working, take a 6-second video and talk about it and how excited you are. People will like it and comment on it. And those are opportunities to reach out. And in terms of once you've got the profile, once you start posting, what do you do then? What can you do to actually leverage more out of LinkedIn? So this is a process that I follow called the 3X system. So first on the kind of 3X system is to grow your network. You've all got over 100 connections, I think. So it was, which is great. There's 100 people you could reach out to and say, hey, I'm just about to graduate. Wondered if you'd be kind enough to review my portfolio. It's a really soft message, but people like to be helpful. They just don't get asked to be helpful very often. So ask them, But if you've got more connections, that's more people you can ask to be helpful. And on LinkedIn, you can send connection requests to 100 people every week before it then starts saying, oh, please don't do that anymore. If you do that 3 days a week, and I'm only talking kind of a 10-minute exercise here, you can quite quickly add to your network. So go out and connect with people that are in the industry. Connect with recent graduates. Connect with Loughborough alumni. Connect with design managers, design directors. If they're in your second degree connection, they're likely to connect with you, because they're looking for people for their future talent pools as well. Don't overthink it, just send the connection request. But make sure they're obviously relevant to the industry. And then you want to broadcast your network. So once a week or more, if you're able to, post something that's going to be of interest, something you find interesting that's relevant to what you're doing. Turn your daily conversations, either kind of at university or on projects or on your kind of your side job. If you're working in Costa Coffee at the weekend, it doesn't matter. It's like real life stuff. Turn that into content ideas. And then engage. Close the circle to, most people when... Most people when they, they hear about social media marketing, think, I'm going to put a few posts out, I'm going to be a millionaire tomorrow. It doesn't work like that. This is a long play. I've been on LinkedIn for 11 years now, and it's only really in the last 18 months since I started Kodu that I've really taken it seriously. I've started posting every week. I started looking at my strategy and recording metrics. I've gone as far as to engage with a content and marketing coaching company to advise me on kind of how this all works, and I've just seen my business just fly off the back of it. Just in terms of the warm engagement that I get, how easy sales calls are now because people know me. I'm not cold anymore. But most people, if I'll put a post out, and then they get frustrated, they give up after a month or two because they're not getting anything coming in. But actually, you've got to be proactive. You've got to be curious. You've got to ask questions. You've got to go out to that network. So reach out to your warmest contacts, your first degree connections. The people that are liking your stuff are going to recognize your face when it pops up in their DMs. If you can do that within 48 hours of them liking, you're more likely to get a response. Okay? And rinse and repeat. Keep doing that 2-3 times a week, and by the time kind of graduation comes around, I guarantee you're going to have some really interesting conversations. Here's what I do 3 days a week, so more of the 3X. Send out 20 connection requests, comment on 10 things on my news feed. Comments are really powerful as well. If you ask a question on a comment, it's how rude is it to ignore a question in public? Imagine if you ask me a question and I just look the other way. That's really weird, wouldn't it? Do it on a public forum like LinkedIn, you're more likely to get a response. So ask an interesting question. That video of the springs at spring manufacturing that Ben put up, you could ask a question about, wow, where was that? Obviously, make it in context. But he's going to engage, And then when you send that follow-up DM, it's like, really enjoyed your post. I thought I'd love to get some time, have a virtual coffee. Well, it depends where they are, you know, but I'd love to get your thoughts on my portfolio. You're much more likely to get a positive response. And sending those 5 DMs on that session as well, you know, it's not much, is it, really? It takes kind of 5-10 minutes to send out the connections, probably about half an hour to do the comments because you've got to search for the right thing, you've got to think about what's going to sound good. But then DMs, you know, most of them are going to be fairly similar. I've also tried voice notes. I don't know if any of you have tried voice notes on LinkedIn, but they are super effective as well. You need to use your app on your phone, but in the DMs, if you press the microphone button, you've got 60 seconds. And in the age of AI, where it's so easy to get, you know, ChatGPT to generate words, it's very difficult to sound human. So if you can send a voice note or a video, you're going to cut through as a human being as well. So top tip for you. Just on the voice notes, approximately 60% of people I send voice notes to respond and then book meetings in with me, whether they are people that might look for work or whether they be employers looking to engage my services or whether they be people that I might want to get on the podcast. And the majority of them say, wow, I've never received a voice note. I didn't even know you could send voice notes on here. So not many people are sending them. So if you want to stand out, send voice notes. Going off script here a little bit because I just thought with the voice notes, make sure you write a script. Otherwise you'll be there forever going, no, I didn't like that one. Delete that. You know, you can have a redo. It's not a one-take thing, but do a script. Yes?
You said you get like 60% replies on voice notes. How much do you get just messaging people normally?
It's less than that. I haven't tracked it because because to be honest with you, most of the time I'm sending voice notes. I prefer my first engagement. I prefer to send a voice note because I want them to hear that I'm a human. You know, there's so much automation software out there that can send messages on your behalf. So I'd say roughly made up stat 90% of the messages I send out, if it's the first message, will be a voice note. If someone connects with me, I'll send them a voice note. If they've liked my stuff, I'll send them a voice note. So it's part of my business development routine in the morning as a really soft kind of, hey, that guy doesn't sound like an arsehole recruiter, kind of, you know, it's kind of moving on slightly from the LinkedIn voice notes and DMs. You know, networking these days, some of it's online, but really getting out in front of people and shaking their hands, saying hello is super effective, you know, but it's super scary as well. But really, you know, how better can you get on a company's radar, you know, if they're not hiring, then meeting kind of decision makers, especially when they're not in the pressure of having to hire. You know, for me, that's the time I want to meet my future clients is when they're not hiring. Because when they're hiring, they're stressed and they're trying to get over the line. They've got all these projects they're trying to run, as well as hire people for their team. So I'd much rather have a conversation with them when they're not in hiring mode. And it's the same as a prospective employee. Because again, most of the time, they're not advertising their roles anyway. They'll be aware of what's coming down the line. So that kind of, you know, ad hoc conversation in a bar, a design truth event, you know, an industry mixer or whatever, you know, those are kind of, treat them as interviews. They're opportunities. So yeah, get out to the networking events, get to the meetups, research who's going to be there. You know, if you're in, don't just see it as a jolly, as a party. You know, most of these things now, you know, I know Brad at Design Truth, he actually publishes a list of who's going. That's gold. Like, look through it. Who can you reach out to on LinkedIn beforehand? Hey, I'm going to the Design Truth event. Or, hey, I'm going to Hardware Innovators. Or, hey, I'm going to be at the New Designers. Okay? Be great to meet you in person. Been following you on LinkedIn for a while. Are you going? You know, or what day are you going to be there? It's something quite short and sweet and concise, not too kind of in the face or overthought. It's just reach out. You only need one or two of them to come back and say, hey, that sounds great. You know, could change your career. So yeah, but be human. be curious, be concise, ask some questions about them, and ask for help. Once you've asked them about them, ask them for some help with you. Can you review my CV? How did you land your job? Just something that's showing that you're serious about this, okay? Again, with a lot of the stuff I've talked about, most people aren't doing any of these things. So you've got an opportunity there to really stand out. And as Tim on the podcast said, anyone that reaches out to him, when they're not hiring or when they are, they go straight on the yes pile. Okay, interviews. Right. Don't wing it. It's basically the short version of this slide. You've got to know the company, you understand what they make, what they do, prepare questions. There's nothing worse than getting to the end of an interview and the interviewer says, so, have you got any questions? And you go, I think you've answered them all. Take too many questions. Don't be afraid to have them written down, It shows that you're prepared, And when you're talking about a project, don't just say what you made. Talk about the challenges, explain why you did it, and what you change next time. Talk about they're interviewing you, not your project team. So try and avoid the we did this, we did that. Teamwork is important, but ultimately they want to know what you contributed, what you bring to the party, what impact are you going to have in that business when you join. Okay. So reflect on the projects. What went well? What didn't go so well? What you do next time? And use the STAR technique. And that quote there from Leo, that's a consistent through all the employers that I speak to. You can talk me through your decision making clearly. That's when I know you've really understood the problem. Cool. So that guide there. It's very straightforward. A lot of it is, like my talk here. Some of it you're like, Chris, I already know all this stuff. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. It's just reinforcing some of the basics, but then giving you some of the little things that maybe you hadn't considered. So if you take one thing from today and it makes a difference, then I'm a happy man. And just some final thoughts. Be proactive. Show your process. Research and practice interviews. Be realistic but optimistic. There's no such thing as a rubbish job. Everyone starts somewhere. Make sure your start sets you up for growth. And I've got a little bonus tool for you. So I don't want to call this a cheat code because we're at university and we don't cheat here, obviously. Okay. But this tool, I'm presuming you've all mucked around with ChatGPT. This is something that a custom GPT that I've put together. Hopefully you can access it. Essentially, it's a researcher for you. So you put in any company name or website, and it will give you a breakdown of the company, their history, the products. It'll even do a very I've got a basic version in there that explains what they do and how they do it as if you're 10 years old. So a very basic thing on there. Tells you who the key decision makers are, any interviews that the founders or senior leadership have given over the last year or so. It's got your financials. It's a super, in my opinion anyway, I'm terribly biased, but it's a super effective way to get a lot of research that, had you gone out and researched this, it would take you hours, and frankly some of the data you might not be able to find because it's behind paywalls and you have to sign up for things. But ChatGPT's have managed to collate it all. So I will caveat this with make sure you double check it. Do go on the company website and make sure that it's the same company. I've had that recently, especially if you've got multinational companies. I work with Shark Ninja, so before a meeting I had recently, I just ran Shark Ninja through this, and obviously it just threw up all the stuff over in Boston in the States, which isn't too applicable to what the guys in London are doing. So, as with anything, do just check it, but hopefully that tool is going to be really useful, just in terms of your research. So, that's it for in terms of my lecture at you. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Why Design, proudly powered by Kodu. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be grateful if you could take a moment to leave a review wherever you're listening. It really helps others discover the podcast. And while you're at it, why not share it with a friend or colleague who'd enjoy it too? If you'd like to stay connected or learn more about the work we're doing at Kodu, head over to teamkodu.com or connect with me, Chris White, on LinkedIn. As the founder of Kodu, I help hardware founders and product leaders tackle some of their biggest challenges, whether that's hiring the right design and engineering talent, shaping product strategy, or navigating the complexities of scaling a hardware business. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.